Okay, it's the morning after the night before, and yes, we are live. Welcome to In the Line of Hire, the show that brings you instant reaction and views of The Apprentice. Obviously, as you know now, I was lucky enough to be part of the Apprentice journey by winning Series 4 way back in 2008. And over the next 12 weeks, which is now down to the next kind of 7 weeks or so, we'll be running a series of shows looking back on the class of 2022 and some very, very special guests. Each week, I'll be joined by our resident expert on the business psychology and the COO and my business partner of the assessment platform, Phoenix 51, Chris Wimshurst, who will be sharing the analysis and data on each of the candidates each week. And we'll be chatting to Chris shortly. You can follow us on Twitter at Lee McQueen, on Instagram, Lee.McQueen, LinkedIn, and be interactive with the live streams via Twitter, YouTube, and also LinkedIn Live. I think we're streaming all the way to there. Although I've got a storm outside today, so my internet connection is not great. You can also download as a podcast after the event on Audio Boom as well. So really, really looking forward to it. This week, I'm totally delighted. 10 years from when I won The Apprentice to this wonderful, wonderful winner, joined by the 2018 winner of The Apprentice, the founder of SIANMARIE, and the business partner to Lord Sugar, Sian Gabbidon. Sian has built an outstanding luxury UK-based swimwear brand, which is very, very popular with the celebs, I hasten to add. And I'm absolutely delighted to have us with her here today. Sian, good morning, Chair. How are you getting on?
I'm good, thank you. Morning, how are you?
Yeah, really, really well, thank you. Really well indeed. So look, just for those of you, those are the viewers and the listeners that don't know too much at the moment, what's your story, Sian? Like, talk to us a little bit about how The Apprentice, I suppose, has changed your life.
Yeah, so obviously, as you said, yeah, I won it back in 2018, but pre the actual show, I finished uni. I set up an Instagram page and I learned how to make clothes basically, and I used to just make bikinis on post them on social media pages, and I started to get interaction. I started to get celebrities, stylists wanting to purchase and buy things, and it just grew into a business basically. And then went from there to obviously setting it up as a full-on business, had a website, and then a few years later I decided to apply for The Apprentice and obviously went on to win it. And just I've had a crazy, God, how many years has it been now? 4 years. But we went from kind of small scale swimwear to mass produced, sold in ASOS. We've just launched with Asda. COVID year was a bit of a crazy one. We kind of merged more into loungewear, but it's been a roller coaster of a journey, but it's been a fun one. And I guess I've been on it with Lord Sugar for the last 4 years. So yeah, it's all good.
It has been an amazing journey. How has it changed your perception, not only maybe in business, but actually overall in terms of the effect that it's had on your life? Has it been a real positive effect in the sense of, did you feel that you would have got your business to this point without working and being a business partner to Lord Sugar?
Definitely not. I think it's been a crazy journey, and when I think about it, pre The Apprentice, I was very much, I guess, more of a designer than necessarily a business person. And I think working with Lord Sugar, having all his knowledge and his team and help and things, I've just learnt so much, I guess, in those 4 years. And without the investment, the investment obviously changed a lot. It allowed us as a business to do a lot. We could have never really gone into mass production the way that we did. We had retail opportunity that came around kind of through The Apprentice. So it's massively helped the business and helped us be able to set the foundation, I guess, for where we want to be in the next few years. So yeah, it's been a huge help.
Brilliant stuff. And Sian, I know that we can't get away from there has been a global pandemic. I mean, setting up an internet-based business, maybe you wasn't as affected, but maybe things like, because you're a luxury swimwear, maybe people weren't going on holiday as much during COVID, and maybe, what sort of effect has the pandemic had on
massive. It's
business?
Been a nightmare. When I first heard about COVID, I remember at the time being like, well, we'll see what happens. It's probably not going to really affect us. It's probably not going to be as big as everybody's talking about. And then we launched a swimwear range in the March, and we went into lockdown, and we literally had people sending the bikinis back saying, my holidays are being cancelled. I don't need to swim. And at that was the point where I was like, this is actually going to really affect us, because we do have a bit of an international reach, but back then it was mainly just UK based. So we were like, okay, even international though, you know, it was affecting everybody. So we literally had to pivot into, we'd always planned to move into loungewear, just not as quick as we did. So we had to very quickly pivot into kind of loungewear, have an offering online, work on a range for retail, you know, for like the following year. So it was like a very scary time. I think the first few months of COVID for me, especially, I was like, this could really massively impact this business. But luckily I managed to, you know, I'm very involved in day-to-day running. So I could very quickly get involved, do what we needed to do, and kind of get us through.
It's been hard, isn't it, to be fair, since I mean, myself and Chris, I'll bring Chris in shortly, but myself and Chris set up our business in 2020 in the middle of a global pandemic. And there was times where we started to think, wow, what are we actually doing? But again, it's like you say, I love that word, pivot, being able to pivot, to being able to adapt, to be able to change to the conditions. And I think that sort of learning makes us all stronger as business owners. So it's fascinating to hear.
I think as well with COVID, the one thing I'd say on it, you know, having Lord Sugar obviously is a huge help for us as a business and cash and things like that. But the pandemic was a time where I was like, he doesn't even have the answer, because nobody knew what was actually going to happen. So it was kind of like, oh God, this is a really big deal. But
Sian, I just want to take you back to your apprentice journey. Now, I referenced earlier, you know, we've got something in common. Obviously, we both won the apprentice. I won it with an 8 in it. You won with an 8 in it, but it was a 10-year gap. Was you aware of, not necessarily my series, but was you aware of the apprentice? But obviously, before you applied to go on, like, what made you apply? What was your thing?
Yeah. I am, even now still, I'm a massive Apprentice fan. So when I was younger, I used to watch it with like my dad, and you know, we'd criticize people, and I used to say, I'd be good on this, Dad. Like one day I'm going to go on this, and I'm going to honestly, I'd do well. And you know, at the time he'd be like, yeah, okay. And then to actually go on it and to win it was obviously amazing, like a dream come true, because I guess I started out as a fan of the show. But you know, I 100% take back everything I've ever said, because as you know, being actually on it is so much harder than what people see, you know, when they're watching it on TV for an hour.
Yeah, totally agree. We've been lucky enough to have lots of past winners on already in the line of hire, and obviously have you on today, and we've got a couple of past winners and finalists lined up for the rest of the show. And actually chatting to the likes of Karina, who's obviously the current champ, and obviously Mark, Tom, and the likes of Alana so far, they've all said the same thing, and I'll back that up. It is really difficult, isn't it? Because it's not just about rocking up and doing a task and then having 3 days off and then doing, you know, getting involved again and looking on the internet. I mean, back then I don't even think we had internet for me, to be fair, so long ago. But it is back to back, isn't it? And it is literally almost like you are constantly on the go. The pressure starts to build up of the most silly things, doesn't it, Sian?
100%. I think, you know, for me, when I used to watch it previously, I used to think, why have they picked such a bad name? Like, of every name they could have chosen, why have they gone with like the worst option? And I get it now. I'm like, you literally sometimes have 10 minutes to think of a name, you know, and it's nothing, you know, it's a lot harder than what you think when you're watching it. So yeah, there's a lot of things that I think being on the show is like, gosh, to get far in it, you have to have so many more talents than what you even understand when you watch the show. Do you know what I mean? So it's tough.
Resilience, for example, determination, some probably basic level attributes or behaviors that you need, but they really come to the forefront. I mean, I remember trying to go to sleep every night thinking, is that phone going to ring? Are we doing a task tomorrow? Are we actually going to be working or what? And you just don't know, do you, Sian? And that's the thing that just makes it, I suppose you're kind of always on edge, no?
100%. And sometimes, you know, like last night at the end when Lord Sugar went to the house and he told them what the next task would be, and literally then that evening you'd just be in bed, laid in bed thinking, oh, what's it going to be, trying to work out what, you know, preempt and pre-plan and think of names even though you don't know what the task is yet. Like it's crazy. And I think, and that's what I mean, I actually think you have to give the candidates, even the ones that go in the early stages, you have to give them props for actually being on there and experiencing it, because it's so difficult.
Yeah, I totally agree. We're getting our excuses out now, but we're okay because we won. We didn't get fired in week 1 or whatever, so we're happy days. Let's get on to the class of 2022. I'm going to bring Chris, our resident business psychologist, in a second. But just talking about kind of, the actual show. Firstly, Sian, what have you thought about the class of 2022 so far? And in particular, what the mixing up of the teams and the dynamics, that type of stuff. What's your kind of professional opinion, having been through this journey? How do you think they're getting on?
I think they're getting on okay. It's still quite early stages, so I don't feel like we've got anyone who's really shining yet. Who you're like, wow, they're really, really good. I think there's the odd person in there, but it's hard to. I don't know everybody's names yet, but there's one guy who I think is doing quite well, and I think for me he's shining a little bit. But
Aaron?
there's so many characters, there's so many personalities. It's interesting just to see how each of them are taking in these tasks and working as teams, or being a little bit selfish. I think the girl that was kicked out last night, I personally think her last few tasks, I don't want to say I'm glad that she went, because I don't want to be harsh, but I do think that she was quite outspoken. And I think for last night, to make that massive spelling error and it to have been her, and her team, was a big kind of mistake on her part, and because she's been quite vocal about, tearing everyone else down.
Did you think that she got a bit over big for her boots a little bit? Because I actually think she's been quite strong in the first couple of tasks. I actually thought she was quite good. You can't make that kind of error and not have a consequence. So I totally get it. But I actually thought yesterday she was trying to be really assertive, almost too assertive. So at some point she was just discarding what Sophie was trying to say, wasn't she?
Yeah, she was. And I think, do you know what? I remember when I was on the show, and there'd be certain errors that you knew were your fault, and you had to make that call as to whether you're gonna own it and say it was, and I apologise, or whether you try and push the blame on everyone else. And I felt like last night she didn't really own it. She should have just said, "My fault. I misspelled it, but that wasn't the reason that we lost the task." Because technically, it wasn't. The game was not great. So I feel like, and I do think that Lord Sugar picks up on that. So I think sometimes you're better off just being honest and being genuine, rather than trying to blame the rest of the crew when, the truth is, nobody recognised the spelling error, but it was her call at the start. So you have to play the game, you have to know how to handle it. Because
totally. Lord Sugar does throw some curveballs in, typically in the boardroom, when he talks about kind of it diverts somebody's attention to something else, and then you see whether or not somebody picks up on that, and that's quite interesting. I think last week, for example, he almost double checked, didn't he, with Alex, of who he's not bringing in Amy. He was like, really? You're not bringing, it's almost like you're not bringing Amy, like, bring her in, because actually I want to give her a going over type thing. But Alex didn't do that, did he? And he come up short. So
that's why it's so interesting, because I think it's like, read the room, especially if you're PM, and you're in the bottom and you've got to decide who you're bringing in. It's harsh to say, but you have to read the room and say, well, maybe in this task, this one person hasn't been that bad, but overall, I know Lord Sugar might pick up on things with them, so I'm going to bring them in. And then it's like you have to think wider than just necessarily just the task. It's a lot. That's what I mean. There's so many elements, I think, to it that you don't think about as like watching it on TV.
How many tasks? I always ask this question to all of the winners. How many tasks did you win and lose? How many times was you in the boardroom fighting for your life type thing?
So I was in the boardroom fighting once in the bottom 3, and I remember it was the worst. It was kind of the worst and best time I had, because any time in the boardroom where it was like almost 1-to-1, you'd think, I've got a bit of airtime now to actually speak directly to Lord Sugar and say what I want to say. But obviously when you're in the bottom 3, it's not good, you're worried that you might get fired. But I remember being in the bottom 3 once, and I was so ready to just rip everyone apart as politely as I possibly could. I thought, I knew it wasn't my fault why we'd lost. I thought, there's no way I am going in this task. So it was quite a nice bottom 3 for me, because I thought no one is going to beat me in this room. And then winning, I know there were definitely 2 tasks that I won and I was PM for. I don't know about overall, like how many of the other tasks that I won, but I know the 2 tasks that I PM'd, I don't know if there were any others, I can't remember, but there was a trainer task, which I hated. And we did like QVC, you know, like live selling. And I took a massive, that was quite near the end. And I remember thinking, I'm taking the risk. If I lose, I'll go with my head held high. And, you know, and I kind of thought maybe just taking the risk, Lord Sugar will appreciate that I've done that. And we won it, which was amazing. It was a really fun task. But yeah, I did quite all right. I didn't have many instances where I were in the bottom 3, so I was quite lucky.
Yeah, brilliant stuff. Let's bring in our resident psychologist and my business brother, Chris, into the stream. How you getting on, Chris?
Yeah, I'm very good, very good. How are you guys doing?
Yeah, really well, mate, really well. Now, you've heard us obviously backstage here talking about Francesca and ultimately, you know, her performances and stuff like that. Just wanted to share if we've got any data on Francesca as well. Oh, look at that, perfect timing. So this is Phoenix 51. This is our digital assessment platform that actually looks at key insights and data around the candidates' performances. Chris, just talk myself and Sian and the listeners and the viewers through some of the data that we've got on Francesca. It doesn't look like she's done very well this week.
Yeah, I think it was interesting listening to your guys' opinions on how Francesca has performed, and I very much agree with some of the insights that you gained from the episode, and that's absolutely backed up on the platform. That there's being assertive and decisive, and then there's simply, you know, closing yourself off to other people's opinions. And I thought that the way she treated Sophie was pretty bad, actually. You know, she just tried cutting her off, and whether she, you know, saw her as a threat. You know, I think Karen Brady mentioned 2 strong women fighting it out, and you got Akshay caught in the middle. But I thought it was really poor, and that's shown in the interpersonal skills area, which has obviously got a red flag on it. Drive and quality focus as well, that attention to detail. I mean, you know, getting the spelling of Arctic wrong was an absolute shocker, and again, that's reflected. No, and so, you know, I think it's a real disappointment. Again, you referenced, Sian, that Francesca had some good weeks, and I think that, you know, 3 out of the 5 weeks she had were very, very good. You know, she was one of the top performers. In fact, one of them actually, you know, ran away with it. Like, showed brilliant leadership skills, absolutely smashed the task, but she fell down this week. And you know, I personally don't think could be much argument with her being fired, if I'm honest.
Yeah, no, I think we agree on that for sure. Let's talk. Turn our attention to the actual PMs. I thought it was quite interesting, Sian, that Nick fancied himself, didn't he, to be a PM again, which I respected that because he's already been PM once. But actually, Brittany was like, no, I really fancy this as well, and everyone kind of put their hand up for Brittany, and I was quite happy because she hasn't really done much. I don't think she's been quite in the background quite a lot so far. What did you think of that kind of incident? And what was it like for you when people were saying, yeah, I'll be project manager, or no, I don't fancy it?
I think it's funny, innit, when people put themselves forward and then there's kind of that awkward moment where no one picks them and you think, oh, poor guy. Because I feel like in my year, part of my like idea was if I can just not befriend everyone, but get everybody on side and they respect me on a level, I'll hopefully never have an instance where if I say that I should be PM and I give a good reason as to why, that no one would want me. So I feel like it's a bit of a red flag if someone puts themselves forward and no one picks them, because they know more than we know about them. Do you know what I mean? They know what they're like in the house and stuff. But I think, with Brittany, it was nice to see her take the lead and put herself forward. And although I do think that the overall running of that task was not ideal from her, but it's always nice to see somebody put themselves forward who you've not seen that much of yet.
Yeah, and as well with Akeem. So I mean, on the other side, Akeem was just straight in. I've played video games all my life. I'm up for this. This is the task that's made for me. And I felt it was quite interesting. For the entire task, Akeem was like, I'm the man for this. I'm really confident. I'm not even nervous. And I'm thinking, you are setting yourself up for a fall here. Obviously, it didn't materialize. But what did you feel about? I actually thought he was actually really nervous and actually covering up some of. Do you agree with that, Sian?
Yeah, 100%. And I think there were quite a few times where Harpreet kind of gave him direction, and he was like, yes, actually, I'm going to change my mind. I'm going to go with what Harpreet's saying. And it's funny. And I think, it's nice when people take on board what other people say. But I do think when you become PM, you have to be assertive and you have to sometimes say, I'm going to go with what I want to do, guys, and this is why. And him saying, although I do think overall, I think they did better because he was saying he plays a lot of games and he kind of understood the brief a bit more instead of trying to link it to, topics. He just was like, it needs to be a game that people are going to want to play. So I think overall, I think he did. I don't want to say they smashed it because they didn't, but they did do better.
It looked more like a game, didn't it? Let's be honest.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole Lara Croft thing, Catherine. I personally love the comment when Catherine's like, "Oh, I'm going to be the star of the show." It would probably really annoyed most people, but I actually loved it. I was like, "Yeah."
Well, when she came out and said, what did she came out and said something that was really awkward.
I'm innocent. And she walked off, like, really? What's going on? But you know what it's like? That production of like, you've got this massive idea and you're going to really do this big production and go loads into it. And then when it gets there, you've got about 5 seconds worth of footage into I'm innocent. And you're like, what does that mean? It just didn't really work, did it, to be fair?
It's
Chris, bringing you back in and just having a look at some of the details. And for our listeners on audio, what we've got here now on the platform is looking at the top scorers. So, Chris, just take us through for this week on the gaming week. Who kind of top scored via our system, Chris?
Yeah, so I think that if you look at the two groups, the group that scored higher consistently, which is represented as the red group here, is the Aaron scoring 16, Akeem scoring 14, Catherine scoring 11, Harpreet scoring 11. So you can see that overall that group did perform better. I think that, and I want to talk about Akeem and Aaron a little bit, but first of all, I do want to focus on Brittany. And with Brittany, I think that she got a little bit of criticism from us last week in terms of the fact that she's really not done anything from the first 4 weeks. And I think that, and we talked about that as a deliberate tactic of kind of holding back. So I was actually really delighted that she put herself forward. I think that her communication skills are okay. I think that she did, put herself out there. She did show some leadership skills. But I think we discussed before we came on, Sian, is that the concept itself is a little bit controversial in terms of, are people going to want to buy into a game that's related to something that, is sensitive as global warming? So I think, it was interesting. It was great to see her put herself forward, but I don't necessarily think that the concept of the game was fantastic and was potentially a little bit overly simplistic. But if we look into the graphs here, I think
commercial awareness. I mean, a commercial awareness for our listeners and audio is really low, isn't it?
Yeah, so commercial awareness, I think that really did fall down. But as you can see, communication skills, leadership skills were good. The creative thinking of some of the concept, the interpersonal skills. So it was good. It was good to see her put herself out there. I think that there lacked a bit of commercial awareness, or a lot of commercial awareness. But actually, in terms of her project management skills, I think that it showed her to do pretty well against the other candidates this week. If we then or compare that to the likes of your Aaron. Now, Aaron is an interesting one, and I'd be interested to know, Sian. You said there's been a consistent bloke that's done well, like pretty much every week. Is it Aaron?
It was Akshay that I was on.
It was Akshay. Okay.
Yeah, I kind of like him. I don't know what I just feel like I've seen quite a bit of him, and I think he's doing okay. And I think he'll be one that when he gets in that bottom 3, he'll fight and he'll do what he needs to do. Aaron is doing. The one thing I'd say about Aaron, right, in my opinion, the last few times I've seen him is when they first get briefed, sometimes he's the one who disagrees with what they want to do from the get-go. And I used to have people like that, and I used to think, I appreciate your feedback, but every single task, you can't just go with the opposite. So when we lose in the boardroom, you say, well, I did say from the beginning that I didn't think it was the right. That's the only thing I'd say on him. I got a vibe that he did that a few times. But
do you think
he has been good. I do think it's a tactic, and I think it's a bit like you have to be, you have to give your opinion, but you do have to work as a team as well. And there's nothing worse than being PM, decided on the route, and everybody agreeing by one person who is sat saying, I think this is the wrong thing to do, because once you're in that boardroom and you lose, that's them saying, I told you that we shouldn't have done this from the beginning. So it's hard. Yeah.
Do you know what's really interesting to me about that? And obviously we're on series 16. There have been some phenomenal series of The Apprentice, and it's still it amazes me how candidates don't work that bit out. You know, if you work together as a team, you cannot get fired if you win the task. So realistically, you should be looking at that group and instead of being defensive and going, oh, actually, if we lose the task, I'm going to put Sian out there, I'm going to put Lee out there, whatever. So actually, we can have a go at them in the boardroom. They should be thinking about, right, let's support and guide and move forward as a unit.
Yeah.
Because I'm probably lucky, to be fair, but I was never in the final three of the boardroom because I was never taken in because I worked my backside off and obviously won more tasks than I lost. I won loads of tasks. So the point being is that if you work together as that unit, you can't actually get fired. That's the game. Does that make sense?
100%. And I think then the other side is if you go in with the attitude of I'm just going to tear this whole thing down because I don't think that they've made the right decision, and then you do lose. If I'm PM, I'm going to say, well, you're coming back in the boardroom because you were never on board. So it's kind of like finding the balance of, you know, not annoying everybody.
So, Chris, how's Akeem getting on then? Because he scored pretty well this week. I agree with Sian. I thought that he was a little bit kind of changed his mind quite a lot. Tim, good friend of ours, obviously another winner as well. He said the same thing on screen, didn't he? He's like, hang on a minute, he's not very assertive. He's just changing his mind. But Akeem scored quite well through our platform.
Well, I think it's a bit more of a deeper philosophical question there, which is what does leadership look like? And, you know, leadership sometimes can be you being decisive and making the decision and sticking with it. But actually, you know, he took on board Aaron's idea, which is what they went with in the end. He got some of Amy's creative input into the storyline. He then also got some further creative input from who is it? From Harpreet. Yeah, from Harpreet. Sorry, get my names mixed up. Actually, from that, I actually ended up creating quite a good concept as a game, and I thought actually it had a lot of interesting, scope for development, which is actually what was stated by the people that actually, you know, they invested money in the end. So I think that there were moments that I didn't potentially like. If you talk about, you know, when. The comments he made at the end, he was like, I went in there and I smashed it, and I literally kind of, you know, and he took all the plaudits, but actually it was a lot of other people's ideas that I think actually ended up winning. But, you know, like I said, I think that as a collaborative project manager, I think he did an okay job, and and he scored okay, so he got 14, right? And Aaron actually top scored this week with 16. But I think what's interesting to note is that compared to previous weeks, people have been top scoring on 21, on 20, and therefore as a whole, this group no one really stood out this week. I think there was a lot of average performances, if I'm honest.
Sian, what's your views on Stephanie? We've been obviously watching her, you know, week on week. I think she's progressively getting better and better. I think she's quite assertive herself and kind of knows what she wants, and not afraid to dig people out if she needs to, but she seems like a bit of a team player. I'm quite interested to see when she becomes project manager. Well, you can see some of her stats on screen now: creative thinking, planning, organising, not great. But overall, what have you thought of her performance, Sian?
I think overall she's come across quite well. I think communication, I agree why that's so high, because I think she seems like she is quite vocal in every task. She gives her opinion. She seems very level-headed with it and quite calm as well, that was one of the things that I was great at, being calm and not letting, you know, myself get carried away, or if I didn't believe in something, kicking off. And I think you have to have that level. So I do like how she's approached the tasks every week. So yeah, I want to see a bit more of her. I'm looking forward to seeing her be PM and see how she acts in that situation.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Sian. She's been my dark horse, my kind of one to watch throughout the weeks, is that she hasn't necessarily really put herself forward, but she's always contributed in every single week. I think she's got good commercial skills. She makes good points. You know, when she actually does contribute, she's got something to say, and I think that's really interesting. But yeah, she maybe has held back a little bit in terms of the ideas, that creative side. So I think it'll be, like you said, it'd be interesting to see her as PM and seeing how she stands out. But I certainly think, me personally, I think she's going to be in the top 5 towards the end.
I do.
I agree. I agree with both of you on that, and actually, it's quite interesting. I didn't project manage. You might think I was a bit of bottling it a little bit, Sian, but I didn't actually project manage till week 7, and she hasn't project managed up to this point. So she's now coming into week 6. So I fully expect her to be project manager next week. And we're going to really see how she shines on that. I think they're over to
because you know there's like that pressure in there when you've not PM'd. I can't remember when I PM'd, but you know that it's due because you're like, I can't keep, because Lord Sugar will one day just call you out if you don't want and say you're PM next. I think he did that with me actually on the trainer's house. It's because I was a designer, so it was like, you're gonna, you know, PM this. I was like, cool.
It is. You do get a bit of pressure on that. So look, let's talk about the I suppose the elephant in the room. Missing out on C. It is an absolute fatal mistake. Francesca, was she responsible for the failure of this task? Which I know we talked at the top of the show, about maybe digging out Sophie or the way she mistreated her, essentially being a bit more assertive. But ultimately, I think what gets me the most is that she actually said on the camera, "Is it spelt right?" She actually said that, and then she went, "Yeah, that's fine." And then she didn't own it, like you said before, Sian. So, did Lord Sugar get it right this week? Was there any other decision to make? I mean, could you make?
I think he got it right, and I'm glad that he didn't pick Sophie, because there was a bit of me thinking, I hope Sophie goes in and actually defends herself, because if not, she could potentially get fired just for not like approaching the situation right. So I'm even though, it's awful to say, I'm glad that Francesca went, but I do think that she was in the wrong, and I think part of the way that she approached it and then dealt, I don't think, like we said, she didn't own it. And I think Lord Sugar would see that as a red flag in itself, because just in general in business, you can't be with somebody who, never wants to own up to the mistakes or never wants to. So I think, I think as well for me, the last few weeks with Francesca, I could imagine how I would have dealt with her in my year. And I would imagine it would have been difficult to work with her. So I think, I think this week, and I genuinely don't think that the spelling error was the 100% the reason why they lost. I think overall the actual game itself was just pretty poor. But I think because of how it was handled from her side and the way that she tried to defend herself, I think that's what tripped her up at the end, to be honest. Because if I was her, my defense would have been, I made the error, but this wasn't the reason why this task failed. The reason was because we chose global warming and penguins, and there's no penguins even in the Arctic. So
I mean, that for me, the failure of the task overall, that having the C out is a massive issue. But because, like you say, I totally agree. Because she didn't own it, that became even more of an issue. But the biggest issue was, it was a global warming situation, and people don't play them types of games. I don't think people didn't invest in that because there was a C missing. I think that could have been easily, look, it's a mistake, it was a development issue, we can change that for moving forward. But people didn't buy the gaming investors didn't buy into the concept because it didn't really make sense. It wasn't that fun. And I think that even though the kind of Lara Croft style, the time, which by the way I thought the trailer was very, very good. I think I do. Yeah,
I want to watch the film, to be honest.
I know. When's the film coming out? Exactly. But I think although that was a real basic game, at least they kind of got the fundamental points. They got an understanding of it, and people got it.
And I think the global warming thing, I think when you're on the show and you have a task, you want to do something that makes it stand out. Whatever it is, the task, you want to try and push the boundaries and then say, well, I want it to link to this and I want it to link to a bigger issue. But some tasks, you need to just hit the brief, and it doesn't need to be overly complex. It just needs to be what it needs to be. And I think in this situation, Brittany definitely overcomplicated it a little bit. It just needed to be a fun game that people would want to play. So trying to link it too much wasn't necessary.
We've both got the pleasure, or had the pleasure, of working with Lord Sugar, and that is one of the key things that I will take away from my time working with him and Simon and the brilliant time that I had at Amscreen is, keep things simple. Make sure the audience, your customers, understand what it is that you do very, very quickly. They get it, they understand it. And by complicating things, you want to be clever almost, but actually a simple platform would have been a much easier idea to, because that's the other thing, viewers and listeners, you've got to understand that this is crammed into literally into hours. This isn't like a week's worth of work. This is like hours. So we're kind of these massive complex ideas that you've got to then execute in 6 hours. It's really difficult. So keep things simple, keep it on brief. And actually, we used to have a thing, myself and Alex, who got to the final with me in my series. We always used to have a thing, always come back to the brief. Where's the brief? Are we hitting parts of it? Again, really basic stuff, but actually that's probably what made us end up winning more tasks than we lost.
But that's as well, I feel like with some tasks, you know, I had tasks where I didn't know anything about. You know, we had a gardening task. I don't even have a garden. Like, you know, it's not something I do. But there's just a lot of common sense in some ways. So, like the game last night, had I have been on the global warming team, I would have literally said, "Can we just check? Would we play this game, guys? I'm not a gamer, but from my knowledge of gaming, would this be an interesting game? Not really. Like, and that would be enough for me to say, let's really look at what we're doing, because we just need it to be appealing and." You know, not try and bloody solve global warming with Sam the scientist or whatever it was called.
Yeah. No, Sam the scientist.
Sam the scientist. Do you know what made me laugh? They were saving the planet and saving animals, but then killing the bad guys.
Killing humans. Yeah, you couldn't make it up, could you? Now, Chris, what other data have you got for us? You got any other data? Anyone else? I was quite interested in Amy this week.
In who? Sorry, Amy?
Yeah, because I thought Amy has been quite steady up until this point. I personally, no offense to Amy, but I think there's something underlining with her. I also think she pushes people over the edge.
Yes.
I think she sets people up for a fall. Oh, this is amazing. You're going to be so good at this task. But really thinking, I'm going to push you over. I think you're laughing. Do you think that?
Agree 100%. She's the one who will say, you should do this. You're really good at it. So you
you kill people with positivity, but actually there's a little bit of some tactics going on there.
Amy, Chris?
Yeah, well, what I think is interesting is that she was very strong for the first 3 weeks, and I think she really got found out last week, and she just didn't perform well. And I think, you know, what I mentioned last week is that she almost seems quite surface level, and once now you've scratched that past that, there's not a lot of substance to her you know, the way that she communicates or the ideas that she has. And I think that her ability to influence diminish. She showed a lack of commerciality, a lack of communication, lack of leadership. She was quite focused this week in terms of, you know, she kept on task and she had good planning and organisation skills, but overall, I think she might be getting found out. So unless, you know, and she still hasn't put herself forward for PM, which I think is really interesting.
Next week, isn't it, Chris?
Yeah.
She's got to put herself forward. I think it's interesting. You look at her commercial awareness. She's at like 20% of where we would expect a maximum score to be on the Phoenix 51 platform. So commercial awareness for me, I think that's also another worry, because I personally think she's the sort of person that will go and get carried away. You know, exactly what we were just talking about, Sian, about, you know, making it complex. I think that. I mean, she read in this task the script for the game. I'm thinking there's people who have been kidnapped from the FBI, and then the mother's got killed. I'm thinking, oh my word, like this is, you know, you've gone into like full film mode, right? She's got it in her to be over complex, isn't she?
Yeah. Well, do you remember it was the same with when they did the alcohol, and she designed the bottle and it was brown and it looked terrible, and she just ran with that, and then was like, you know, I designed the whole thing, and I'm like, it looks dreadful. Like,
that would be carried away. You know, when you put your hands up and say, "Yeah, I did that." That's one that you don't. Yeah. Brilliant stuff. So look, I mean, it's absolutely fascinating. We think that Lord Sugar got it right. I do agree. I mean, I think that the overall failure of the task. I personally think if Francesca had showed a little bit more gumption or assertiveness like she showed in the task in the final three in the boardroom, she might have been able to pin the failure of the task more on Brittany, but ultimately, you know, Lord Sugar made his decision, and you know, we'll agree that we think it's the right one, which is a shame, because I thought Francesca was certainly in the early days, I thought she was a front runner. Who do you think, Sian, is one to watch for the coming weeks, and can I get a prediction from you in terms of who you think is actually going to go on and win, or at least be in the final?
Oh, I don't know. It's hard, because I think there are a few kind of standouts. I do still think Akshay is potentially one to watch.
Really?
The girls
he's lost 4 tasks Akshay out of 5.
I think I don't know whether
you've got a little feeling for Akshay, isn't it?
I think it's how he carries himself. I know when in our year we had a guy called Daniel, and he was very similar in the way that he was as a candidate, and he did really well. Daniel, he got to final 5, and I just feel like Akshay has a bit about him where even when he's in the bottom 3, he'll fight his way out of it. But overall, I think the girls are still stronger, and I think we've not seen a lot of them, and I think that there's some in there, even Catherine. I like that we're getting to see Catherine a more fun side to her, and I think when you do these tasks and you have to dress up and be silly, and she's just rolling with it, and I really I appreciate her for that. She's showing a genuine side. But yeah, I don't know. I think Harpreet's done quite well so far. She last night she made some good calls that they went ahead with that did well. The week before she did quite well. And I guess we'll see what happens with Aaron, because I do think he's maybe a bit of a dark horse. I think he might pull through and own a task one week, be PM and smash it. But you just don't know, do you?
It's hard, isn't it? It's definitely coming to the point now. I don't know whether you felt this when you was obviously as an Apprentice fan, but also when you was on the show and on the road to winning it. But you certainly start to feel week 6, week 7, week 8, you're really getting into the crux. I actually think Lord Sugar said yesterday, didn't he? Like, I thought by now the cream would start to rise to the top, but he's not quite seen it. I do think you're going to start seeing some standouts. Chris, you got any data on that?
Yeah, so what we're going to have next week is we're about a third of the way through the series. We were lost 6 candidates. So essentially we're going to do some analytics on the platform, which is going to show the cumulative scores of all the weeks so far to get some real data to see actually how they performed in totality across it. For me, I think, Aaron has been Mr. Consistent. He hasn't really stood out, but he hasn't done anything massively wrong apart from that there's certain toothbrush, but we'll park that. And Catherine again. With Catherine again, I think that she's been really, really good, like very consistent, very strong, shown some good PM skills, but also sub-team leader skills, and just contributed in every group. Stephanie, as I said, I think she's got a lot more to show, and Harpreet as well. I think your comments on Akshay, I think he's a little bit Marmite. Like, some people like him, some people don't. So we'll have to see, how he performs. But I think we're starting to get into more the business end of the show now. You've lost your kind of your runners, and now we're starting to get in the real quality, hopefully. And I think I would echo Alan Sugar's comment. I don't think anybody's really started to show that quality that he would like. I really want to go into business with that person. So hopefully someone's going to start stepping up and putting themselves in.
Just quickly on that as well. Obviously, I won in a time where it was work for Lord Sugar, or Sir Alan as he was then known, but Lord Sugar, and ultimately, you won in a time when it's a business partner and a business plan. How big is the business plan part of, because we don't know at the moment, the candidates that we've got left, we don't know what their business plans are. So how big do you think the business plan or the business idea is in effect going to influence Lord Sugar's decision?
It's hard because, I'm not sure, because I personally feel like, you could go in there with the strongest business plan of every single person, but during those tasks, if you're not showing yourself to be someone that he could envisage himself working with, it really wouldn't matter. I know for our year, we had a girl, I can't remember her name now. She already had a really successful business that was turning over millions. And when we found that out, we was a bit like, well, she's probably going to win it then, but she didn't. And I think he, he's working class, like he's from a very working class background. And I think he wants to just feel the candidates have that same passion for what they do that he had, I just think it's a mixture of the two. Your business needs to be an idea that can work, or a business that is doing okay, but I think it more boils down to you as a person and your drive. And these tasks are great because it really does show you how you react in all kinds of situations. And you might get through the first 3 weeks because you've done okay, but you might get to a task where you're just a nightmare, or you show a quality of yourself that they've not yet seen, and he's just like, I'm not going to work with them.
For example, it happens, doesn't it? And I honestly, Sean, I completely agree. It's why we built Phoenix 51, the digital assessment platform that enables organizations to look at behaviors and competencies and attitude and really understand on a week-by-week basis. The Apprentice is a perfect giant assessment center to see, to watch, to observe. You've got Tim, you've got Karen, you've got Lord Sugar looking, watching. Can Sian deliver? Can Lee deliver? Has Chris got it in him? So regardless of the business plan, if you haven't got them qualities that he's looking for, commercial awareness, communication, leadership, if you haven't got them, you don't end up winning. And I think that is, I agree with everything you said. It's literally perfect. And actually a perfect way to close your show, to be fair. Sian, you've been absolutely amazing. We've had been an absolute ball this week. Love to get you back on later in the series if, of course, you're up for it. I know you've got a busy time coming up with the seasons changing and all that sort of stuff. So wish every success with SIANMARIE. I know it's doing absolutely amazing. Where can people find you, Sian? Where can people follow you? Where's your platform?
So you can find the brand is at SIANMARIE on Instagram, and then sianmarie.com online. And then me personally, I'm just at Sian Gabbidon on Instagram. That's my main platform. I have Twitter, but I stick to Insta. So yeah, you can find me on there.
Yeah, brilliant stuff. And we'll be retweeting and posting some stuff on Instagram as well on this show. And it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on, Sian, again this week. So there you have it. We're 6 down, 10 to go. Next week's show will be live again for the morning after the night before at 8:30 on Friday morning. So please subscribe Phoenix 51 YouTube channel. Please follow me on @Lee McQueen or Lee.McQueen on Instagram to get all of the latest news. You can listen on Spotify, on Apple Music, and Amazon Music via Audio Boom as well. So you've got everything covered. If you want to grab a coffee and a cuppa, or have a little listen when you're walking the dog, when you need a break from your desk later on, or whatever it might be, please log in and have a go. We'll be back next week again live to review Task 6 with the epic Thomas Skinner. Really, really looking forward to that one. Don't forget to subscribe and like and share, and we'll see you next time on In the Line of Hire.